Philosophical inquiry often delves into the relationships between fundamental concepts, seeking to uncover the underlying structures that shape our understanding of reality, ethics, and existence. One effective method for analyzing these relationships is through the use of triads, a framework that examines how three interconnected elements influence and depend upon each other. By exploring these triadic patterns, we can gain a more nuanced and systematic understanding of complex philosophical ideas. A triadic analysis involves identifying three core components within a philosophical system and examining how they coexist, reinforce, and interact. This approach allows for a comprehensive exploration of the interdependencies and dynamic relationships between concepts, offering insights into the coherence and structure of a philosophical theory. In the context of Baruch Spinoza's philosophy, this method proves particularly illuminating. Spinoza's works, especially his Ethics, present a highly systematic and logical approach to metaphysics and ethics. By applying a triadic analysis to Spinoza's key concepts, we can uncover the intricate ways in which his ideas about substance, attributes, modes, and human experiences interrelate. The following analysis uses triadic patterns to explore Spinoza's concepts, contextualizing each with quotes from his works. This approach not only clarifies Spinoza's philosophical system, but also highlights the coherence and depth of his thought, demonstrating the power of triadic analysis in understanding complex philosophical doctrines. Coexistence. Spinoza's philosophy emphasizes the intrinsic interconnectedness of God, nature, and substance. He states, "By God I understand a being absolutely infinite, that is, a substance consisting of an infinity of attributes, of which each one expresses an eternal and infinite essence." Ethics, Part 1, Definition 6. This highlights how God, nature, and substance coexist in a mutually interdependent manner, forming a unified reality where each is equivalent and essential to the others. Equilibrium. Spinoza's notion of individual modes suggests that the absence of certain modes leads to a balance or equilibrium among others. He writes, "The human mind is part of the infinite intellect of God. Thus, when we say that the human mind perceives this or that, we are saying that God has this or that idea, not insofar as he is infinite, but insofar as he is explained through the nature of the human mind." Ethics, Part 2, Proposition 11, Corollary. This demonstrates how the equilibrium among modes reflects the interdependence of human cognition and divine intellect, balancing each other when one is absent. Reinforcement. In Spinoza's ethical framework, understanding leads to virtue, which in turn leads to blessedness, and this blessedness reinforces the pursuit of understanding. He posits, the more we understand particular things, the more we understand God. Ethics, Part 5, Proposition 24. This shows a reinforcing loop where each element strengthens the others, creating a virtuous cycle of ethical living and deeper understanding. Feedback. Exploring negative feedback, Spinoza's idea that a lack of understanding leads to a lack of virtue and blessedness is evident when he says, "All happiness or unhappiness solely depends upon the quality of the object to which we are attached by love." Ethics, Part 5, Proposition 20, Note. The absence of understanding results in the absence of virtue, leading to a lack of blessedness, demonstrating how the absence of one element negatively affects the others. Causal. In Spinoza's view, substance causes attributes, which in turn cause modes. He states, "A mode is that which is in another through which it is also conceived." Ethics, Part 1, Definition 5. This highlights a causal chain where substance is the root cause that brings about attributes, and attributes lead to the various modes, forming a direct causal relationship from the fundamental to the specific. Reversion. Spinoza's concept of reversion indicates that the absence of attributes leads back to the absence of substance, and the absence of modes leads to the absence of attributes. He writes, "Nothing exists from whose nature some effect does not follow." Ethics, Part 1, Proposition 36. This implies that without substance, attributes and modes do not exist, establishing a reversal where the absence of the fundamental leads to the absence of the derived. Non-linear Spinoza's understanding of the relationship between substance, mind, and body is non-linear. He says, the order and connection of ideas is the same as the order and connection of things. Ethics, Part 2, Proposition 7. This suggests that substance influences the body, which in turn influences the mind, creating a non-linear relationship where each element affects the next in a non-sequential manner. Retrospectively, Spinoza's idea that the mind and body depend on substance is reflected in the human mind is capable of perceiving a great number of things, and is so, the more its body can be disposed in a great number of ways. Ethics, Part 2, Proposition 14. This indicates that the absence of substance leads to the absence of the body, which in turn leads to the absence of the mind, showing a backward-looking dependency. Inclusive Spinoza's framework of conatus, the drive to persevere, reason and freedom is inclusive, with each element enhancing and including the others. He writes, the endeavor, wherewith everything endeavors to persist in its own being, is nothing else but the actual essence of the thing in question. Ethics, Part 3, Proposition 7. This shows how the drive to persevere leads to the development of reason, which in turn leads to true freedom, and freedom enhances both conatus and reason. Exclusively, Spinoza suggests that lacking conatus, reason, or freedom disrupts ethical living. He states, no one can desire to be happy, to act well and live well, without at the same time wishing to be, to act, and to live. In other words, to actually exist. Ethics, Part 3, Proposition 6, note. This implies that the absence of reason leads to the absence of conatus, the absence of freedom leads to the absence of reason, and the absence of both conatus and reason leads to the absence of freedom. Conjoined Spinoza's concepts of desire, joy, and sadness can be seen as conjoined, where each emotion influences and is influenced by the others. He asserts, desire is the actual essence of man, insofar as it is conceived as determined to a particular activity by some given modification of itself. Ethics, Part 3, Proposition 9, note. This shows how joy can influence both desire and sadness. Desire leads to joy, and sadness can lead to joy through understanding and transformation. Bottlenecked. In a bottlenecked relationship, Spinoza's ideas show that the lack of desire and sadness results in a lack of joy. He writes, the mind, as far as it can, endeavors to conceive those things which increase or aid the body's power of activity. Ethics, Part 3, Proposition 12. This indicates that the absence of both desire and sadness leads to a lack of joy, demonstrating how the lack of fundamental emotions constrains the emergence of joy. Harmonic Spinoza's ethical framework can be seen harmonically through the interaction of intellect, will, and action. He mentions, the intellectual love of the mind towards God is the very love of God by which God loves himself. Ethics, Part 5, Proposition 36. This suggests that intellect and will together lead to appropriate action, intellect and action together enhance will, and will and action together enhance intellect, creating a harmonious relationship among the three. Dissonant. In a dissonant framework, Spinoza suggests that lacking intellect, will, or action disrupts ethical harmony. He notes, he alone is free who lives with free consent under the entire guidance of reason. Ethics, Part 4, Proposition 68. This implies that the lack of action leads to the lack of both intellect and will. The lack of will leads to the lack of both intellect and action, and the lack of intellect leads to the lack of both will and action, creating dissonance in the absence of these elements. Convergent Spinoza's aims for knowledge of God, love of God, and blessedness are convergent, with each leading to and enhancing the others. He writes, the highest good of the mind is the knowledge of God, and the highest virtue of the mind is to know God. Ethics, Part 4, Proposition 28. This indicates that the knowledge of God leads to both love of God and blessedness. Love of God leads to both knowledge of God and blessedness leads to both knowledge and love of God, showing convergent relationships. Divergently, Spinoza's view on the absence of these elements is evident. He states, he who lives according to the guidance of reason endeavors, as far as he can, to repay the hatred, anger, and disdain of others towards him with love and nobleness. Ethics, Part 4, Proposition 46. This suggests that the lack of love and blessedness leads to the lack of knowledge, the lack of knowledge and blessedness leads to the lack of love, and the lack of love and knowledge leads to the lack of blessedness, demonstrating divergence in the absence of these elements. Combination. Spinoza's understanding of mind, body, and experience can be seen in combination, where each influences the others. He says, the body cannot determine the mind to thinking, and the mind cannot determine the body to motion or rest. Ethics, Part 3, Proposition 2. This highlights how the mind without the body, or both together, relate to experience, the body without experience or both together relate to the mind, and experience without the mind or both together relate to the body. Division is evident when Spinoza notes, the knowledge of evil is an inadequate knowledge. Ethics, Part 4, Proposition 64. This suggests that the body without the mind or both together imply the lack of experience, experience without the body, or both together imply the lack of mind, and the mind without experience, or both together imply the lack of body, illustrating a divisive relationship. Association. Spinoza's idea of human emotions like love, joy, and sorrow can be seen associatively, with each emotion influencing the others. He states, joy is man's passage from a lesser to a greater perfection. Ethics, Part 3, Definition of the Emotions 2. This indicates that joy without love or both together relate to sorrow, joy without sorrow or both together relate to love, and love and sorrow together lead to joy, showing associative relationships. Disassociation. Dissociatively, Spinoza mentions, an emotion which is a passion ceases to be a passion as soon as we form a clear and distinct idea thereof. Ethics, Part 5, Proposition 3. This suggests that love without joy or both together imply the lack of sorrow. Sorrow without joy or both together imply the lack of love, and the lack of joy implies the lack of both love and sorrow, illustrating disassociative relationships. Integration. Spinoza's metaphysical understanding of substance, attribute, and mode is integrative, with each concept leading to and supporting the others. He writes, whatever is in God, and nothing can exist or be conceived without God. Ethics, Part 1, Proposition 15. This shows how substance leading to attribute or the absence of mode, mode leading to attribute or the absence of substance, and substance and mode together lead to attribute, creating an integrative relationship. Disintegration. Disintegratively, Spinoza asserts, all things are determined by the necessity of the divine nature to exist and act in a certain way. Ethics, Part 1, Proposition 29. This indicates that the lack of attribute leading to the lack of substance, or the presence of mode, the lack of attribute leading to the lack of mode, or the presence of substance, and the lack of attribute implies the lack of both substance and mode, demonstrating a disintegrative relationship. The application of triadic analysis to Baruch Spinoza's philosophy has illuminated the intricate interdependencies and dynamic relationships within his system of thought. By examining how core concepts such as substance, attributes, and modes coexist, reinforce, and interact, we have gained a deeper understanding of Spinoza's systematic approach to metaphysics and ethics. This method has allowed us to see the coherence and logical structure underlying his work, highlighting the value of triadic analysis in philosophical inquiry. Generalizing this approach to other philosophers can similarly reveal the foundational structures and interconnections in their systems of thought. By identifying triads within different philosophical frameworks, we can systematically explore how key concepts influence and depend upon one another. For example, applying this method to the works of Immanuel Kant might involve examining the triadic relationships between phenomena, noumena, and the categories of understanding. In Aristotle's philosophy, we could analyze the interplay between substance, form, and matter. Triadic analysis provides a versatile and powerful tool for dissecting complex philosophical ideas. It allows us to move beyond a linear or dualistic understanding of concepts, embracing the multidimensional nature of philosophical systems. By doing so, we can uncover deeper insights and appreciate the nuanced interconnections that define the works of various philosophers. In conclusion, the use of triads to analyze philosophy offers a robust framework for exploring and understanding the intricate relationships within different philosophical systems. By generalizing this approach, we can apply it to the study of other philosophers, revealing the fundamental structures that underpin their theories, and enriching our comprehension of philosophical thought. This method not only enhances our understanding of individual philosophers, but also contributes to a broader and more integrated view of philosophy as a whole.